Number 1. Craig Stephen Hicks. On February 10, 2015, emergency responders entered a Chapel Hill apartment and found a triple execution. 3 Muslim students, 23-year-old Daya Shadi Barakat, a second-year UNC dental student, his wife of 6 weeks, 21-year-old Yusor Muhammad Abu Salah, and her 19-year-old sister Razan, lay dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. All 3 were killed quickly and methodically. Within hours, the shooter walked into a nearby police station and surrendered. His name was Craig Stephen Hicks, a 46-year-old neighbor known throughout the Finley Forest condominium complex for aggression, arguments, and confrontations over parking spaces. He carried a .357 caliber handgun, the same gun that forensic testing later matched to the shell casings inside the victim's apartment. The murders immediately triggered national and international attention. Hicks didn't fit a standard violent offender profile. He was a former auto parts salesman and a paralegal student who spent much of his time complaining about parking rules and sharing anti-religion posts online. Neighbors described him as hostile, heavily armed, and constantly patrolling the parking lot while open-carrying firearms. Several residents reported feeling threatened long before the murders. The victims' families insisted this was a hate crime. Dr. Muhammad Abu Salah, father of the 2 women, reported prior confrontations between Hicks and his daughters, specifically when they wore hijabs. Witnesses noted Hicks was especially aggressive toward Muslim residents, while his disputes with white neighbors rarely escalated. To the families, the motive was religious bias, not parking. Chapel Hill police initially described the incident as a dispute over parking spaces. The reaction was immediate and global. Protests, vigils, and public statements erupted in multiple countries, accusing officials of minimizing the murders. Even President Obama commented on the case, urging tolerance and unity. But the investigation took a decisive turn in 2019. During plea discussions, prosecutors revealed that Daya Barakat had recorded the final 36 seconds of his life on his phone. The video showed Hicks arriving at the door, arguing briefly about parking, then opening fire almost immediately. The recording captured Daya's murder and the screams of Yusor and Razan before Hicks executed them as well. The footage destroyed any claim of self-defense and confirmed the killings were deliberate. Hicks's personal life added more disturbing context. His ex-wife described his fixation with the film Falling Down, a story about a man who responds to frustration with escalating violence. Mental health evaluations found signs of paranoia and anger issues, but he was still ruled competent to try stand. The combination of hostility toward religion, obsession with firearms, and unstable behavior created a volatile profile. In June 2019, Hicks pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and to firing into an occupied dwelling. Prosecutors dropped plans to seek the death penalty to move the case forward. He received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. During sentencing, the families delivered detailed victim impact statements. They emphasized the potential each victim had already shown. Daya had recently begun dental outreach work for Syrian refugees. Yusor had been accepted to dental school. Razan was a high-achieving architecture student involved in charity work. All 3 had participated in humanitarian efforts, including homeless outreach and refugee relief. Their families repeatedly argued the murders were an act of Islamophobic violence and should have been charged federally as hate crimes. Federal prosecutors said they could not meet the legal threshold for a federal hate crime conviction, leaving many unsatisfied. North Carolina's own hate crime laws at the time applied only to misdemeanors, not murder. These limitations caused long-lasting frustration among the victims' supporters.
Chapel Hill's police chief later admitted the department's early focus on a parking dispute was a mistake that minimized the broader significance of the crime. The case led universities across the state to reevaluate safety policies and reporting mechanisms for bias-related incidents. Today, Craig Hicks remains in prison, serving 3 life sentences. The victims' families continue advocacy efforts and have created multiple charitable programs in their memory. A dental relief fundraiser started by Dea before his death grew from $3,000 to nearly $300,000 after the murders. The case remains one of the most widely discussed acts of domestic violence involving religious bias in recent American history. An attack carried out not by a stranger with a manifesto, but by a neighbor whose anger, paranoia, and fixation on control turned deadly.
Number 2. Robert Jason Owens. In March 2015, Christy Shun Codd and her husband, Joseph J.T. Codd, vanished without warning from their home in Leicester, North Carolina. Christy, 38, was 5 months pregnant and had gained national visibility after competing on Season 8 of the Next Food Network star. She worked as a caterer and chef on film sets. J.T., 45, worked behind the scenes in TV and movie production. The couple had recently moved to the area, excited to renovate their new home and prepare for the arrival of their daughter, Skylar. They hired local labor to help with construction work. One of those people was Robert Jason Owens, a 36-year-old handyman who lived close by. On March 14th, Christy's family grew worried when she didn't arrive in Mississippi as planned. Phone calls went unanswered and messages remained unread. When relatives went to the Codd's house to check on them, they found signs something was seriously wrong. The couple's 2 dogs were inside the home. Christy's purse and JT's wallet sat in plain view. Lights were on, but the Codds were gone. Friends contacted the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, officially launching a missing persons investigation. The first major lead came from a neighbor who had noticed Owens dumping several large black garbage bags into a dumpster on Donna Drive shortly after the Codds disappeared. The timing was suspicious enough that investigators searched the dumpster. Inside one of the bags, they found personal items belonging to Christy, including her identification card. This discovery immediately shifted attention to Owens. Detectives brought him in for questioning on March 16th. Owens denied any involvement at first. Then he began giving shifting explanations that didn't match the physical evidence. Finally, he produced a story that investigators found nearly impossible to believe. He claimed that while trying to free his truck from a creek bed near the Codds' driveway, Christy and JT came outside to help push the vehicle. Owens said he accidentally hit the accelerator and ran over both of them. He insisted the deaths were accidental and said he panicked because he wasn't legally allowed to drive due to a previous conviction. What he described next removed any doubt about his intent to hide the truth. Instead of calling 911, Owens said he carried Christy's body into the house and tried to perform first aid. When she died, he took JT's body to his own property and burned it inside a wood stove. The next day, he returned to the Codds' home, moved Christy's body into a shower stall, dismembered her using tools, and burned her remains as well. He spent several days repeating the process, burning and discarding remains until almost nothing was left. Investigators later described his actions as methodical, deliberate, and consistent with someone trying to eliminate all physical evidence. During the same time period, Owens attempted to maintain a cover story to delay suspicion. He used Christy's phone to message family members, claiming the couple was sick and unable to travel. He also sold some of the Codds' belongings, using the money for gas and dinner with his wife. Meanwhile, he continued burning the Codds' remains in his wood stove until investigators arrived. A search of his property revealed the truth. Forensic teams found human remains within the stove that DNA testing later confirmed belonged to Christy, JT, and their unborn daughter, Skylar. Tools found at Owens' home also showed evidence consistent with dismemberment. The discoveries shocked Asheville's culinary and entertainment communities. Christy was known for her generosity, including organizing free holiday meals for people in need. JT was remembered for his dedication to film production and his reliability on set. Their family said both had been looking forward to raising their daughter and building a life together in their new home. The case grew even darker when Owens' past resurfaced. He had been a long-standing person of interest in the 2000 disappearance of 18-year-old Zeb Quinn, a community college student who vanished after meeting Owens to look at a car. Owens was the last person verified to have seen Quinn alive. He gave inconsistent statements to investigators, claimed to have been injured in a car crash that no one else witnessed, and refused to cooperate with Quinn's family. For years, police suspected Owens was involved, but they lacked concrete evidence. The Ka's murders brought Quinn's case back into the spotlight. In August 2015, the Buncombe County District Attorney announced plans to seek the death penalty against Owens, calling the Ka's murders among the most disturbing homicides the county had ever seen. Investigators noted that Owens had nearly completed the full destruction of both victims' remains before he was caught, clear evidence of a calculated effort to hide the crime. However, in April 2017, Owens agreed to a plea deal. He pled guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder, 1 for JT, 1 for Christy, and 1 for their unborn child, along with 2 counts of dismembering human remains. In exchange, the prosecution dropped the death penalty and consolidated robbery charges related to the couple's belongings. Owens was sentenced to between 59 and 74 years in prison, effectively ensuring he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. During sentencing, Owens apologized, but the families did not accept it. The Schoen family released a harsh public statement saying the apology meant nothing. They rejected his claim of an accidental death and called the plea deal insufficient given the brutality of the crime. They believed Owens killed the Ka's intentionally, possibly due to a dispute involving money or dissatisfaction with his work. To them, the systematic dismemberment and burning of the bodies proved premeditation, not panic. Then, in 2022, Owens entered another guilty plea, this time in connection to the long-cold Zeb Quinn case. He admitted to being an accessory after the fact and claimed a now-deceased relative shot Quinn. Owens said he witnessed Quinn's body being burned and the ashes dumped near Bent Creek. Investigators could not verify his story through physical evidence, but Quinn's family said having even a partial explanation offered some closure after more than 2 decades. Today, Robert Jason Owens remains in a North Carolina state prison. The Ka's former home, where part of the crime unfolded, was eventually torn down. The case is remembered for its extreme level of deception, the calculated destruction of evidence, and the connection to a cold case that had haunted Asheville for years. Christy, JT, and Skylar are remembered for the lives they lived, and the future Owens erased.
Number 3. Jason Young. A name that would come to symbolize one of the most disturbing domestic homicide cases in North Carolina history. A case where a pregnant mother was slaughtered in her own bedroom while her toddler wandered alone through blood-stained hallways. A case that would take years, 2 trials, and a state Supreme Court ruling before it reached its final chapter. And it all began with a simple, strange request. On November 3, 2006, Meredith Fisher woke up expecting an ordinary day. Instead, she received a call from her brother-in-law, 32-year-old Jason Young. His request seemed weird but harmless. He told her he was out of town in Virginia for business and needed her to stop by his house in Raleigh to collect some eBay printouts from his home office. Printouts, he said, were about Coach handbags he had been researching for Michelle's anniversary gift. Jason said he didn't want Michelle finding the papers and ruining the surprise. Nothing about the request sounded urgent, but something about his tone unsettled Meredith. Still, she agreed. She had no idea she was walking into the aftermath of a massacre. When Meredith entered the Young home later that afternoon, something felt wrong immediately. The normally bright, cheerful house was still, too still, silent. She climbed the stairs, calling Michelle's name, her voice echoing through the hallway. Then she reached the master bedroom. Inside, horrors she could never unsee were waiting. 29-year-old Michelle Young lay face down in a massive pool of blood on the floor beside the bed. Her skull had been crushed by more than 30 blows from a blunt weapon. Blood spatter painted the bedding, the headboard, the walls, everywhere. Michelle was 5 months pregnant with a baby boy. And then Meredith noticed movement. She pulled back the sheets and froze. Michelle's 2-year-old daughter, Cassidy, was sitting beneath the blanket, confused, hungry, covered in tiny dried spots of blood. And as she looked up at her aunt, she asked a question that would haunt investigators for years. "Mommy fell. Mommy won't wake up." Tiny bloody footprints, Cassidy's, were scattered across the upstairs floor, down the hallway, and throughout the bedroom. It was clear she had been left alone for hours, wandering near her mother's body. Police rushed to the home, and from the start, suspicion locked in on one name: Jason Young. Jason, the husband who conveniently wasn't home, the husband whose marriage was known to be unraveling, the husband who left town just hours before Michelle was murdered. He claimed he left Raleigh the previous evening around 10:45 p.m. to attend a business meeting in Virginia. He checked into a Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia, 3 hours away, around midnight. He said he went straight to sleep and never returned to North Carolina. But investigators quickly learned the Young marriage was anything but peaceful. Friends described the couple's relationship as volatile, public arguments, jealousy, resentment, and insults exchanged openly in front of others. Many believed the couple married only because Michelle became pregnant, not because they were ready.
In the weeks leading up to her murder, the tension escalated. Michelle's mother, Linda, was preparing to move in with them to help with childcare. Michelle was excited. Jason was furious. He didn't want his mother-in-law living with them, and he didn't hide it. There was also the issue of Jason's double life. He had a long history of cheating. Prosecutors uncovered secret emails, deleted texts, hidden meetups, and multiple affairs, including one with Michelle's former sorority sister, Michelle Money. He played the role of a devoted husband in public, but privately lived as though he were single. Even Jason's ex-fiancée testified about his violent side, recalling how he ripped the engagement ring off her hand during their breakup, leaving bruises. The friendly, charming Jason seen by friends wasn't the whole picture. Then, investigators discovered something even more chilling. The Hampton Inn where Jason stayed had surveillance cameras that worked perfectly until 11:20 p.m. At that exact moment, a camera in a side stairwell mysteriously lost power. The cord had been unplugged. Shortly afterward, a hotel employee found an emergency exit door propped open with a rock, an exit that led directly to the parking lot. That door was supposed to stay locked at night. Detectives believed this was how Jason slipped out unseen, drove 3 hours back to Raleigh, murdered his wife, and returned before dawn. But there was more. A gas station attendant in North Carolina reported seeing a man matching Jason's description early that morning, a time when Jason claimed to be asleep in Virginia. On Jason's laptop, investigators uncovered disturbing searches: anatomy of a knockout, head trauma knockout, divorce laws. At the same time, toxicology tests suggested Cassidy may have been given an over-the-counter sleep medication the night of the murder, possibly to keep her sedated during the killing. Jason Young was charged with first-degree murder and went to trial in 2011. The evidence was powerful but circumstantial. There was no murder weapon, no blood found on Jason's car, his clothing, or his hotel room. Unidentified fingerprints were found in the Young home, and the defense emphasized the difficulty of proving Jason could make the round-trip drive, murder his wife so savagely, and return without leaving traces. The result? A hung jury. 8 jurors voted to acquit, 4 voted to convict.
The courtroom and the state were split. But prosecutors weren't done. In January 2012, Jason Young went to trial a second time. This time, the jury heard additional evidence, including a civil wrongful death lawsuit Michelle's family filed. Jason never responded to the suit, resulting in a default judgment legally holding him responsible for Michelle's death. The second jury deliberated for only 6 hours. On March 5, 2012, Jason Young was found guilty of first-degree murder. Michelle's family cried, hugged, and finally felt some sense of justice, though nothing could erase the pain of losing a daughter, a grandchild, and watching little Cassidy grow up without her mother. Jason was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the legal saga didn't end. In 2014, the North Carolina Court of Appeals threw out his conviction, ruling that the civil lawsuit evidence unfairly influenced the jury. A third trial seemed likely. Then, in 2015, the North Carolina Supreme Court overturned the decision and reinstated Jason's conviction, ruling that even without the civil judgment, there was more than enough evidence to support the guilty verdict. Jason Young remains in prison today, still claiming he's innocent. Cassidy was raised by her mother's family, protected from the gruesome details of that night. Michelle's relatives continue to honor her memory and advocate for domestic violence awareness. This case became a landmark moment in North Carolina law, raising questions about the overlap between civil and criminal proceedings and exposing how domestic violence can simmer behind closed doors, invisible, until it erupts into tragedy. And as investigators would soon learn, Michelle Young's murder was not an isolated story. Because in another case, a father-daughter duo would attempt something unthinkable, committing murder and then portraying themselves as heroes.
Number 4. Pizuzu Algarod. It started on a fog-drenched October morning when the town was still half asleep, wrapped in a silence that felt heavier than usual. People always said the mountains created strange weather, but that day the air felt wrong, as if something old was waking up beneath the surface. The first sign was subtle. A few families noticed that the men who left early for work simply never arrived. One missed a construction shift. Another never showed up to open his shop. A truck belonging to a local farmer sat abandoned at a crossroads with the engine still warm, the driver's door wide open as if he stepped out and vanished mid-movement. Phones rang without answer. Texts remained unread. At first, everyone brushed it off as coincidence, but the uneasy feeling spread through town like a quiet infection. By noon, people started checking the woods, the lakeside, and the old mining trails. But it was the caves, those massive, twisting caverns carved into the mountain, that drew the most attention. Nobody liked going near them. Kids dared each other to throw rocks inside, but no one ever stepped past the entrance. Rumors said the caves breathed at night. Some claimed you could hear whispers drifting from deep within, whispers that didn't belong to any human voice. Still, search teams went in. Flashlights sliced through the darkness as echoes bounced around in unnatural ways. Even when they stood still, the officers heard steps behind them, light and deliberate, as if someone or something was matching their movements. The air inside grew colder the deeper they traveled. Not normal cold, a bone-deep chill that felt like it was sinking under their skin. Then they found the first real sign that something violent had happened. On the cave wall, long claw marks were etched into the stone. Fresh marks. The edges were clean, sharp, and dripping with a fine dust that still floated in the air. No animal in the region had claws like that, and no human could have cut stones so easily. Nearby, they found what looked like fingerprints pressed into the mud, except each finger was too long, jointed strangely, bending in ways no human hand could bend. When they radioed the surface, the signal cracked into static, voices warped into metallic screeches. Some officers said they heard someone whisper their names directly into their ear, even though nobody was close. One man claimed he felt breath on the back of his neck, warm and slow, even though the cave air was freezing. Farther in, they discovered a shoe, a man's work boot, lying perfectly centered on a flat rock, untouched by dirt, as if it had been placed there intentionally. Next to it, small piles of pebbles were arranged in a perfect circle. Searchers assumed it was a clue someone left behind, until one officer nudged a pebble and everything inside the cave went silent. No echoes, no dripping water, no wind, just silence, so complete it made their hearts pound in their ears. Their flashlights dimmed without warning. The beams stretched thin, like the darkness was swallowing the light. Tiny vibrations passed through the ground, subtle at first, then strong enough to make dust fall from the ceiling. Something heavy was moving beneath them, or above them. They couldn't tell. The sound wasn't footsteps, it was slower, dragging, like something enormous was shifting through the rock itself. Deeper in the cave, the search team found another clue. A torn jacket sleeve, stuck high up in a narrow crack, far above any place a person could reach without climbing gear. But the fabric wasn't ripped clean. It looked chewed, frayed, soaked with something dark that hadn't fully dried. Someone on the team whispered that they needed to leave. Another insisted they keep going. But then they noticed something horrifying. The footprints they had left behind on their way in were disappearing. One by one, the prints softened, then smoothed out, then vanished entirely, as if the ground was swallowing them. It wasn't natural erosion, it was fast, deliberate, like the cave was resetting itself. A noise echoed from deep within the darkness, a low, rumbling growl that didn't sound like any creature known to man. The growl vibrated through their ribs, made the lights buzz, made the dust dance in the beam of their flashlights. Then came a sharp metallic clicking, slow and rhythmic, like claws tapping stone. The clicking grew louder, closer, as if something was approaching them with calm, confident steps. One officer swore he saw a massive shadow move across the wall, tall enough to reach the ceiling, with limbs bending at impossible angles. Another said he saw eyes, dozens of them, glinting in the dark like tiny glass beads. But none of them stayed long enough to confirm what they saw. They turned back immediately, running through the twisting tunnel, trying to follow the faint markings they had left earlier. Except the markings were gone. The cave had changed. Something followed them. They didn't see it, but they heard it. Heavy breathing, soft scraping, a deep inhale, like something was smelling them, learning their scent. And then, suddenly, silence again. The search team burst out of the cave, pale, shaking, drenched in sweat, faces drained of all color. They didn't speak for hours, and when they finally did, every story matched, even the unbelievable details. That night, the mountain made noise. Deep, thunder-like booms echoed across the valley, rattling windows miles away. People reported shadows moving across the tree line, even though no wind was blowing. Dogs howled for hours. A few families quietly packed their belongings and left without telling anyone where they were going. They didn't care. They just needed to get away from that mountain. By morning, the town realized the missing people were only the beginning. Whatever lived inside those caves had come closer to the surface, and it wasn't finished. Number 5. Quincy Javon Allen. In the summer of 2002, 22-year-old Quincy Allen began a crime spree across South Carolina and North Carolina that would leave 4 people dead, several others targeted, and entire communities on edge. Allen, who also referred to himself as Weird Man and Serial Killer, carried out a series of shootings, arsons, and random attacks that prosecutors later described as one of the most senseless and unpredictable stretches of violence the region had ever seen. Allen was born in 1980. By his early 20s, he already had a documented history of psychiatric hospitalizations. His defense would later claim he suffered from severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, and had been admitted to psychiatric facilities at least 6 times throughout the late 1990s. Prosecutors, however, argued that he exaggerated symptoms and understood exactly what he was doing. Regardless of the motivation, what happened during July and August of 2002 was clear. Allen was fully armed, mobile, and willing to kill anyone he encountered. His first known attack occurred on July 7, 2002 at around 4 a.m. in Finley Park in Columbia, South Carolina. Homeless man James White was sleeping on a bench when Allen approached him with a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. Allen later recorded the moment in an audio tape, casually describing the shooting as if he were documenting an experiment. He mocked the victim, saying White didn't see the shotgun. White survived. He recalled waking to someone yelling, being shot in the shoulder, and screaming as loudly as he could in hopes of scaring off the attacker. The tactic worked, and Allen fled the scene. 3 days later, on July 10, 2002, Allen escalated to murder. His victim was 45-year-old Dale Yvonne Hall. Hall was shot repeatedly in the head, face, leg, and stomach by the same shotgun. After killing Hall, Allen drove to a truck stop, purchased gasoline, returned to the crime scene, and set Hall's body on fire. The murder was brutal, deliberate, and marked the start of the pattern Allen would continue throughout the summer: spontaneous violence followed by arson meant to destroy evidence. On August 8, 2002, Allen struck again. This time, the chain of events began at the Texas Roadhouse restaurant on Two Notch Road. Multiple employees there knew Allen personally, including Brian Marquise and his friend, 22-year-old Jedediah Haar. Hours earlier, Marquise had proposed to his girlfriend, Tiffany Todd, inside the restaurant. The mood had been positive and calm until Allen began acting erratically. According to testimony later given in court, Allen attempted to light Tiffany's apron on fire. Combined with other strange behavior, Tiffany contacted Marquise and asked him to return. Haar drove Marquise back to the restaurant. Whatever confrontation took place afterward between Allen and Marquise would trigger yet another killing. Later that night, Allen shot and killed Haar while Haar was sitting in his car. The attack was sudden. Haar died instantly. At around 10:15 p.m., Allen pursued Marquise to a convenience store, then followed him to his home, where Allen set the porch on fire. Marquise survived only because he escaped before the flames spread. Only a few hours after killing Haar, in the early morning hours of August 9th, Allen continued the arson pattern. Around 2 a.m., he set fire to a vehicle belonging to another Texas Roadhouse employee. Minutes later, he randomly selected another car on Longbrook Road and set it on fire as well. At this stage, Allen was not hiding, not slowing down, and not attempting to avoid attention. Every action was reckless and unpredictable, making him increasingly dangerous. On August 12, 2002, the spree reached its deadliest point. Allen traveled into North Carolina and entered a Citgo gas station in Dobson. Without warning, without argument, and without any prior connection to the victims, Allen opened fire inside the store. He killed 53-year-old clerk Richard Hawks of Low Gap, North Carolina, and 29-year-old customer Robert Shane Roush of Lancaster, Ohio. Both were shot without confrontation. Allen robbed the store and fled. These two murders would ultimately form the strongest part of the prosecution's case against him and would later secure his first life sentences. By this point, law enforcement in multiple states were searching for him. Witness reports, ballistics evidence, arson sites, and the nature of the shootings all pointed toward a single suspect. Allen was moving quickly, crossing state lines, sleeping in his vehicle, and following no consistent path. But on August 14, 2002, 2 days after the North Carolina killings, Allen's run came to an end. Around 6:30 a.m., deputies in Mitchell County, Texas, found him sleeping in a parked vehicle at a rest stop. He was arrested without a fight. Allen was transported back to the Carolinas to face charges. Prosecutors in North Carolina moved first, presenting their strongest case in order to secure a life without parole conviction. In February 2004, Allen pled guilty to 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of armed robbery, and felony larceny related to the killings of Hawks and Roush. He received 2 consecutive life sentences. The death penalty was removed from consideration during the plea negotiations. After his North Carolina sentencing, Allen was extradited to South Carolina to face charges for the murders of Hall and Haar, along with multiple counts of arson, attempted murder, and firearms offenses. In 2005, during the South Carolina proceedings, the court heard the self-recorded audio tape Allen had made after the Finley Park shooting. In the recording, he stated his name, his self-given nicknames, and described the shooting in plain detail. He showed no remorse. Prosecutors used the tape to argue that Allen's actions were premeditated, intentional, and motivated by a desire to kill for the sake of killing. The defense countered by presenting evidence of Allen's extensive mental health history. They argued he had endured physical abuse, suffered from multiple psychiatric disorders, and required long-term institutional treatment. They claimed Allen was not mentally sound enough to be executed. Prosecutors rejected that argument, stating that Allen's behavior demonstrated planning, mobility, and clear awareness of his crimes. According to them, Allen was manipulating the system to avoid the death penalty. During the hearings, survivors and family members testified about the impact of Allen's actions. James White recounted the moment he woke up on a park bench to the barrel of a shotgun. Tiffany Todd spoke about the moments before Hare was killed, the confusion outside the restaurant, and the lasting effect the murder had on her family. She revealed that her child with Brian Marquise was named Brian Jedediah Marquise, honoring the man who died that night. In the end, Allen pleaded guilty to the South Carolina murders as well. On February 20, 2004, he received a death sentence in South Carolina, although his earlier North Carolina life sentences remained in place. His case became one of the most violent and short-lived serial killing sprees in modern South Carolina history. 4 murders, multiple arsons, attempted murders, and an entire multi-state manhunt compressed into just over 1 month. Allen's victims were 45-year-old Dale Yvonne Hall, 22-year-old Jedediah Hare, 53-year-old Richard Hawks, 29-year-old Robert Shane Rausch. Each was killed with the same sawed-off shotgun Allen carried during the entire spree. Each attack was sudden and unprovoked, and each crime added to the pattern prosecutors described as a complete breakdown in restraint, leaving only violence behind. Allen remains incarcerated, serving life sentences in North Carolina, with a South Carolina death sentence attached to his record. His case became one of the most violent and short-lived serial killing sprees in modern South Carolina history. 4 murders, multiple arsons, attempted murders, and an entire multi-state manhunt compressed into just over 1 month. Number 6. Jonathan Douglas Richardson. In July 2010, 21-year-old Jonathan Douglas Richardson brought a severely injured child to Johnston Medical Center. The girl, 4-year-old Tegan Ka, was covered in cuts, bruises, burns, bite marks, and had a fatal head injury. Richardson claimed she had fallen off a bed, but medical staff immediately recognized the injuries as consistent with repeated abuse. Doctors contacted authorities, turning what seemed like a routine emergency into a homicide investigation. Tegan Ka was the daughter of Richardson's girlfriend, Helen Roxanne Reyes. Reyes had left the child in Richardson's care while she traveled to New Mexico for Army Reserve training. For 10 days, Richardson had sole responsibility for the child, keeping her at an outbuilding behind his grandparents' property. During that period, the child suffered ongoing and escalating abuse. Pediatric forensic specialist Dr. Sharon Cooper described the injuries as deliberate punishment. Despite medical intervention, Tegan Ka died 3 days after admission. An autopsy revealed 144 separate injuries, including 66 bite marks matched to Richardson's teeth. She had lost over 70% of her blood volume. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Richardson was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, first-degree offense with a child, and felony child abuse inflicting serious injury. Johnston County prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. The case was widely regarded as one of the most severe prosecuted in the county's history. The trial began in March 2014 in Smithfield. The proceedings were intense and emotionally overwhelming. Medical experts detailed every injury, describing the repeated trauma in precise terms. Law enforcement officers who investigated the case broke down on the stand while recounting what they saw. Witnesses testified to Richardson being alone with Tegan Ka during the entire period of abuse. The timeline established that the child was healthy when her mother left and progressively sustained multiple injuries in Richardson's care. The bite marks were conclusively linked to him, leaving no doubt about his involvement. The defense argued that Richardson had not intended to kill the child. They claimed he shook her in frustration, causing brain injuries and delayed seeking medical care. They also cited his history of abuse, alleging he had been mistreated by his father and suffered from untreated mental health issues. They urged the jury to consider life imprisonment without parole as sufficient punishment. On March 25, 2014, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges after just over an hour of deliberation. Richardson was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, first-degree offense with a child, and child abuse inflicting serious injury. The evidence against him had been overwhelming. The case then moved to the sentencing phase to determine whether he would receive life without parole or the death penalty. During sentencing, prosecutors presented additional context about the child's final days. District Attorney Susan Doyle described how Tegan Ka had suffered and bled in the shed behind Richardson's grandparents' property. Assistant District Attorney Greg Butler called Richardson a sadist, emphasizing the cruelty of his actions. They highlighted Tegan Ka's copy of the book, Good Night, Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Bedbugs Bite, drawing attention to the tragic irony of her final experiences. Richardson's defense continued to plead for life without parole, arguing that execution would not undo the harm and that a sentence of life imprisonment would prevent him from harming another child while allowing him to reflect on his actions. After less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury recommended the death penalty on April 3, 2014. Richardson showed no reaction as the verdict was read. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. His mother and grandmother wept, while Tegan Ka's family expressed a mixture of relief and grief, acknowledging that no punishment could undo what had been done. Tegan Ka's grandfather, Geralda, stated bluntly, "He destroyed my little granddaughter and she's never coming back again." Superior Court Judge Thomas Lockitch formally sentenced Richardson to death, making him North Carolina's 153rd death row inmate. His legal team immediately began the appeals process. Over the following years, they challenged the conviction and sentence, arguing evidentiary errors and claiming the death penalty was disproportionate. In September 2023, the North Carolina Supreme Court upheld both the conviction and death sentence in a 6-1 ruling. Justice Michael Morgan wrote that Richardson had received a fair trial and sentencing, and that the punishment was neither excessive nor disproportionate. One justice dissented on procedural grounds, but the majority concluded the process was proper. Richardson remains on death row, though North Carolina has maintained an unofficial moratorium on executions since 2006. During his incarceration, he demonstrated ongoing violent tendencies. A detention officer discovered a homemade shank in his jail cell, fashioned from a nail file attached to a toothbrush, prompting court-ordered shackling during proceedings. Helen Roxanne Reyes, Tegan Ka's mother, was charged with negligent child abuse for leaving the child in Richardson's care despite knowledge of potential danger. Her case received far less attention, but her actions were a contributing factor to the tragedy. The Richardson case forced the county and state to confront uncomfortable truths about protecting children. It prompted discussion on mandatory reporting, caregiver screening, and child welfare monitoring. It also reignited debates over capital punishment and whether some crimes are so extreme that only the ultimate punishment was justified. Tegan Ka is remembered through memorials, candlelight vigils, and advocacy by family and community members. The case remains a stark example of deliberate, systematic abuse and the consequences of failing to protect the most vulnerable. Richardson's name stands alongside a small group of individuals in North Carolina whose crimes were considered so extreme that the state concluded only the ultimate punishment was justified. The case demonstrates the limits of forgiveness, the responsibilities of guardianship, and the enduring impact of violence against children. Number 7. Rae Carruth. Rae Carruth was once seen as a rising star in the NFL, a young wide receiver with explosive potential and a future that looked almost guaranteed. Born on January 20, 1974, he worked his way up from Sacramento to the football fields of the University of Colorado, where he earned All-American honors in 1996. The Carolina Panthers drafted him in the first round, 27th overall, and he signed a 4-year deal worth nearly $4 million. In his rookie season, he delivered exactly what the team expected: solid numbers, 4 touchdowns, and a spot on the all-rookie team. Fans saw him as one of the promising young faces of the franchise. But behind that image, behind the fame and the money, there were cracks that nobody fully understood until it was too late. By 1999, Carruth had already dealt with injuries, disappointment, and pressure to live up to the hype that surrounded his name. And at the same time, he was involved with a woman named Sherika Adams, a 24-year-old who was 8 months pregnant with his child. Their relationship wasn't steady, but she cared about him, and she believed that despite the ups and downs, they were connected by the child she was about to bring into the world. Everything changed on November 16, 1999. Late that night, after the two had gone to see a movie together, Sherika followed Carruth's vehicle as he drove home along a quiet residential road in Charlotte, North Carolina. The road was mostly empty, just 2 cars moving through the darkness, hers behind his. But as she drove, something felt wrong. Carruth slowed down in front of her, then stopped. She couldn't go around him, and before she realized what was happening, another car pulled up on her passenger side. Its window dropped, a gun appeared, and shots tore through her vehicle. She was hit 4 times, in the neck and 3 times in the back. Bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe, Sherika still managed to steer her car off the road and into the yard of a nearby house. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her voice weak but clear enough to describe what had just happened. She told the dispatcher that Rae Carruth had stopped his car in front of hers moments before another vehicle approached and someone inside shot her. She believed it wasn't random. She believed he was involved. Her words would later become a crucial piece of the case. She was rushed to the hospital. The baby, unable to wait, had to be delivered through an emergency C-section. The child survived, but would live with permanent disabilities caused by oxygen loss. Sherika fought for a month in the hospital, unable to fully recover, until she died on December 14, 1999. When news of her death reached investigators, they went straight to Carruth. He had already been arrested and released on bond, with the agreement that if she died, he would turn himself in. But instead of doing that, he vanished. His disappearance caused a nationwide alert. Police and federal agents searched for him until they found him hiding in the trunk of a car outside a motel in Tennessee. Inside the trunk were cash, clothes, snacks, bottles for urine, and a cell phone, evidence that he intended to flee for good. Investigators pieced together the truth quickly. 2 other men were involved: Michael Kennedy, who rented and drove the vehicle used in the shooting, and Van Brett Watkins, a violent career criminal who fired the gun. According to witnesses and phone records, Carruth was the one who planned everything. Prosecutors argued that he arranged the attack because he didn't want to pay child support, a motive they believed was tied to his financial frustrations, his ego, or his unwillingness to deal with another responsibility. The trial captured national attention. A professional athlete accused of orchestrating the murder of a pregnant woman, it was a story that dominated headlines. The 911 call was played in court. Doctors and nurses who treated Sharika testified to what she wrote and said before she died. Kennedy and Watkins outlined the plan, describing how Carruth told them where he would be, when he would be leaving the movie theater, and how they were supposed to carry out the attack. Watkins testified that Carruth initially wanted Sharika beaten so she would lose the baby, but when that didn't happen, the plan escalated. The defense tried to argue that the shooting wasn't a murder plot, but a situation connected to a drug deal that Carruth refused to finance. They claimed Watkins acted on his own, angry and uncontrollable. But the phone calls, the timing, Carruth's behavior afterward, including hiding in a trunk, all weighed heavily against him. In January 2001, after 11 weeks of testimony and more than 70 witnesses, the jury delivered a mixed verdict. Carruth was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle, and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. He was not convicted of first-degree murder, meaning he avoided the death penalty, but he still received 18 to 24 years in prison. The other men involved received their own sentences. Watkins, who admitted to pulling the trigger, was sentenced to at least 40 years. Kennedy pled guilty to second-degree murder. Abraham, another man connected to the plot, received lesser charges and probation. Carruth's son survived, but because of the lack of oxygen at birth, he lives with cerebral palsy and permanent disabilities. He is cared for by Sharika's mother, who has remained strong through the years despite everything she lost. Carruth's fall from NFL success to convicted conspirator became one of the most shocking crimes involving a professional athlete. His story wasn't just about a man who made mistakes, it was about a man who used his friends, his influence, and his position to try to eliminate someone he saw as a burden, and in doing so, destroyed multiple lives, including his own.